Good morning, everyone. We'll give folks another minute or two to come into the Zoom part of the room, but hello to everyone who is in the room part of the room in person as well. And hello to everyone on Zoom who's filing in. Great. Well, welcome, everyone. I'm Constance Prompton. I may be a slightly unfamiliar face for this, as I'm sure you're expecting Brian Ray, who is under the weather and sends his regrets. So I'm here to introduce our speaker today. This is the second talk in the Digital Culture Lecture Series. The Faculty of Arts has created this series as a way to highlight current research that employs digital methods and tools, and that analyzes the influence of digital culture, both on daily life and research itself. So during this series, we'll be presenting monthly lectures that address the major themes of visualization, data, and ethics. And you can find out more online and certainly register for any of the upcoming events. I'd like to start with an Indigenous land acknowledgement, knowing, of course, that that land acknowledgements are only a first step on the way to making right relations with the people on whose land we gather. We'd like to pay respect to the Algonquin people, who are the traditional guardians of this land. We acknowledge their longstanding relationship with this territory, which to this day remains unceded. We pay respect to all Indigenous people of the region from all across Canada who call Ottawa home. We acknowledge the traditional knowledge keepers, both young and old, and we honor their courageous leaders, both past, present, and future. It is a real pleasure for me to introduce Clare Appavoo, the Executive Director of the Canadian Research Knowledge Network, which is a partnership of 81 institutions from across Canada that include world-class academic libraries and research institutions, 2 national libraries, and Canada's largest public library system. CRKN is dedicated to advancing interconnected, sustainable access to the world's research and to Canada's documentary heritage content. This is a bit of editorializing on my part. If you're at U Ottawa and I'm seeing like who's in the Zoom call, chances are CRKN is like reaching out and touching your research life, even if you don't know it. So many of the pipes that are under the hood that make research possible is coming through this organization. In her lecture entitled Digital Cultural Heritage Collections, Enabling Innovative Access and Expanding Research, Clare will share CRKN's vision to evolve existing Canadiana infrastructure and enhance the content to inspire new research, to mobilize data for the humanities and social sciences, and to develop a more competitive Canadian cultural heritage sector that can contribute globally to digital research. This is exciting in that I think so often we think about access to journal content as the thing that CRKN does, and this is like wonderful to hear about the other initiatives. So without any further ado, I will hand the mic back to you, Clare. Welcome.
Much appreciated. And here we go. All right, let's see if I can manage. Yes, good, very good. I am going to give me a second here while I attach the mic. There we go. Great, thanks all. Well, thank you very much for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to be here. And I will start with just, I think, kind of gave a nice introduction actually to who we are at CRKN, but I'll just give you a tiny little bit of context setting, and I'll try not to spend too long on that. Our mission, our mission and vision as an organization is that the world's knowledge is accessible by all, and that we at CRKN then advance interconnected, sustainable access to the world's research and to Canada's documentary heritage content. And we deliver that value to academic libraries, heritage institutions, and knowledge seekers within Canada. And we have, as Connie mentioned, a national membership of university libraries from across Canada. We have both world-class research institutions like yours here at University of Ottawa, and other innovative teaching-focused institutions from across the country as well as members. Library and Archives Canada and Bibliothèque et Archives Nationales de Québec are both members of CRKN, and Toronto Public Library is a foundational member from the Canadiana side of things also. And then we have a couple of associate members who are from the broader cultural heritage community as well. Very briefly, I'm going to remember to keep up my slides and my notes at the same time. A quick introduction to a little bit of history, just a context set. So CRKN was founded in 1999 as the Canadian National Site Licensing Project. And the intent was for one national organization to leverage an opportunity from the Canada Foundation for Innovation to make digital journal content part of research infrastructure, to be able to provide equitable access to that digital journal content to institutions across the country, so that researchers, no matter what institution that they were in, would have a much broader range of access to that research content. So that's very much been our foundation, our raison d'etre at CRKN, is that enabling of equitable access. So in 2001, we received our first grant for a CFI grant, and that allowed us to do licenses with STEM journals and to license that initial STEM content. It's hard to imagine in this day and age, but that was still while we were transitioning from print to digital. And so that was the content that was readily available, was on the STEM side of things. By 2004, CRKN was incorporated as a standalone not-for-profit organization. And we have strong roots here at University of Ottawa because our home was initially at the University of Ottawa. And we sat in the, I think it's the 4th floor of the library where the librarian's office is. So we were sitting physically in that space. By 2007, we were able to leverage another CFI opportunity and thus brought in the Humanities and Social Sciences journal content and some monograph content as well at that period. So 2 large grants that, and they were large. There was $20 million in the first case that was matched by $20 million from the provinces and another 10 from the participating member institutions, 64 at the start, 67 by 2007. And then in the HSS grant was for $19 million, and again matched from across the country. A few sort of key milestones along the way. We transitioned what was originally a license arrangement, a traditional subscription license arrangement with Erudit for their, obviously very important journal content, Canadian journal content. We transitioned that to a partnership, and a partnership with the goal ultimately of supporting open access and transitioning that content to open access in Canada. And another major milestone was broadening our access, our scope of what we were doing to think more about research infrastructure broadly. And we took on an administrative lead role as an organization for the development of PID infrastructure in Canada, persistent identifiers. And we are the host for ORCID Canada Consortium, as well as together with Carl, co-hosts for the DataCite Canada Consortium. And there's quite a lot of activity on that, but not the focus of my talk today. At the same time, our sister organization, Canadiana, has a much longer history. They have over 40 years of history. In 1978, they were formed as the Canadian Institute for Historical Micro-Reproductions, and they evolved over time, doing pilot digital projects from micro forms to digital. They joined together with Alouette Canada to become Canadiana.org in 2008. And CRKN CRKN members had been subscribing to Canadiana content that's on the Canadiana platform from 2006. So that sort of participation together, that collaboration was pre-existing. In 2013, CRKN members, through a voluntary contribution model, raised $1.8 million so that key content from Library and Archives Canada could be digitized and made available on the Canadiana platform through the Heritage collections. So we'll take a quick look at that in a bit. By 2018, we did the formal merger with Canadiana. So that brought this sort of contemporary content and digital content activities together under one umbrella. And we had to go through, obviously, a new strategic planning exercise to really take into account that broader activity, research activity in our organization. A key moment for us was in January 2019 when we were able, as a community, to remove the paywall to access the Canadiana content, which had been a subscription only at that point. And you know, the CRKN members were really, that was a key component of doing the merger. That was a commitment that we had to make, was to be able to remove that paywall, and that the whole activity continues to be funded by CRKN members in order to support that access at no charge. A couple of other key milestones along the way to do with open access and open science are the one key one was in 2021 when we signed our first transformative agreement to transition a large commercial journal package to towards open access. And I'll talk just a bit about that as well. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the development of the Canadiana infrastructure and how we've done now a separation of what was one platform from that supported both access and preservation of content into two infrastructures to support access and preservation. Our strategic objectives, as I mentioned, we updated those in 2019, and our three goals are to transform scholarly communications, to develop and foster partnerships, and to advocate collaboratively, really in the service of transforming scholarly communications. So that's kind of like a long-term goal. I don't think we're going to achieve that in 5 years, but we're definitely working on that as a goal. And we really are committed, and it is really, I think of it as a continuum of access as we expand, advance, transform, preserve, and enrich access across to all of that content. Oh, I'm sorry. History of Canadiana, catch up. CRKN, other history. Our strategic objectives. Access to knowledge. I will try and keep up. You can give me a sign. Okay, so at a glance, we have a broad community of volunteers who participate in our board, in our committees, and in our various task groups. As Connie mentioned, there are, and I was saying earlier about our membership. In terms of the licensing side of things, we manage license expenditures of anywhere between $125 and $140 million a year. It's partly dependent on the Canadian dollar, because so much of that content is paid for in US dollars. And we preserve our digital documentary heritage on a trustworthy digital repository with 4 nodes across the country. And we have 62 million now pages of digital documentary heritage. So our governance infrastructure, or governance structure is heavy at the moment, I would say. We have 25 staff, we have our volunteer boards, 6 standing committees, 3 subcommittees, 3 task groups. And at the moment, within our task group activities is very much the support of the evolution of our digital infrastructure. We have a researcher council that's new this year. a heritage infrastructure business planning task group that's new. And we have a subcommittee that reports into the board that also oversees at a strategic level where that's all going. Excuse me, I've got one of those messages, update your software. Weren't we talking about this earlier as well? I mentioned 25 members of the CRKN team divided into various activities, and I won't dwell on that too much. So I am going to, because I think it's relevant, talk a little bit also about the licensing side of things. So we do have the two arms of content at CRKNs. We have the journal and monograph content. We do that licensing activity. We have, we provide licenses to our member institutions across the country to the largest journal packages, Elsevier, Springer, Wiley, Sage, Taylor and Francis, American Chemical Society, and Oxford, Cambridge, all of those big journal packages are negotiated and licensed through CRKN on behalf of our members. We also have developed infrastructure in terms of a model license that talks about that we use with our publishers when we're signing those agreements that continues to evolve to meet the evolving needs of researchers. So text and data mining and disclosure of the terms of the agreement, supporting authors in retaining copyright. We can't enforce that because that's between the author and the publisher, but we put that goal into the license. And then we're heavily involved increasingly over the last few years in open access collaborations and supporting open access initiatives as well. And then of course, on the heritage side of things, access to the two digital Canadiana collections and preserving that through a trustworthy digital repository and expanding those collections through our own access and preservation, digitization work, sorry. The types of content packages that we negotiate, mostly e-journals, some ebooks, a few primary source databases, some software and services. It's kind of evolving over time because the scope of what's needed is evolving over time. So we continue to do that kind of work as well. One thing that I think is important in this is really underlying the work that CRKN does both in all of our content side of things. And that is to be principled in our activities. So we have developed through our content strategy committee that guides our negotiations with publishers, a set of principles both for our licensing program in general that defines the way that our members work together, and then also principles that for negotiations that we share with our publishers to say, these are our expectations from you when we are doing agreements with them. So one, sustainable scholarly communications is our goal, equity of access, open access scholarship, supporting that, and transparency so that around the world we can see how content is being negotiated and what is possible within the community. And then increasingly, we are exploring our multiple pathways to open access. So as I mentioned, we have some partnership models for open access publishing with Coalition Publica, with RD for Coalition Publica. We work with the global community on Scope 3, which is the sponsoring consortium for open access publishing in particle physics. So it's all about HEP content, high energy physics content. We participate in the OA 2020 initiative. We work and support SCOS, PLOS, MIT Press in their D2Open as well. So we do the transitional agreements with publishers within that context, that is only one part of the pathway towards open access. And we do look to, even in our agreements, to try and lower the cost. where we aren't able to remove the cost of APCs for our authors, we at least attempt to lower them through our agreements as well. And overall, in terms of sustainability, our goal continues to be, and that's always member driven, reduce the cost of subscription agreements in general. So just a few of our partners here that you can see that we work with in this space. So moving on to our cultural and heritage collections. We have two core collections. We have the Canadiana collection, which is 20 million pages of digitized historical monographs, serials, government publications, and we've recently added over 22,000 maps to our collection in partnership with McGill University. And that was a pretty exciting moment for us because it involved some technical infrastructure as well to be able to display those maps in a new way for Canadiana. And then in terms of our Heritage collection, as I mentioned, that was actually funded in part by CRKN members being able to support the digitization of this content. And it's 42 million pages of digitized archival microfilm collections from LAC. And they include military records, genealogical records, government publications, and so much more. And then again, as I mentioned, the paywall to access these collections was removed in January 2019. So our collections continue to grow and change so that we can best serve our research communities. And as I'll talk about a little bit in the future, we really are thinking about what does that mean? What is possible in terms of being able to provide a corpus of content for researchers to use within our infrastructure. So part of our activities as we mobilize those 62 million pages of documentary heritage is really to incorporate rights statements, for example, to the content. We, in some cases, Creative Commons statements don't work. They don't define what the content is. So we have a whole project to develop rights statements as they're appropriate to the particular content in the collection. And then of course, we are recognizing the unique rights of content, rights for access to content about Indigenous peoples, and really needing to be able to describe that within our rights statements as well. And we really are continuing to engage both with the research and the Indigenous communities on this project as well. We most recently are working together with NICLA, which is the National Indigenous Knowledge and Language Alliance, who are hoping to develop a respectful terminology platform so that we can collaboratively across Canada be contributing towards that effort. I meant as we think about the content, we have a lot of metadata initiatives because that's just, it's all about metadata, right? So what if you have the content if nobody knows how to find it? So decolonizing is a big project for us. We've completed phase 1, which is to replace the subject headings Indians of North America with Indigenous peoples or autochthone. We are continuing to work on that. And there's so many layers there. It's not, I mean, obviously that is a huge undertaking. We're just at the tip of the iceberg of that work. And then discovery. So we work closely with Discovery Systems to enable access to the Canadiana content as well through MARC records and KBART files. And we have catalogers actively cataloging our materials as well. Our preservation infrastructure is we have this certification for trustworthy digital repository, which really ensures that we are compliant with sustainability of the platform, that we're governing ourselves effectively, and that the infrastructure isn't only in one place and therefore fragile and vulnerable. So we have 4 nodes of Canadiana infrastructure across the country: University of Toronto, University of Alberta, University of Victoria, and Dalhousie University all house the nodes. And what we do to maintain our TDR status is actually it's quite a lot on the governance side of things. It's really about tracking what we're doing in that area. So we're going through a bit of an audit on that as well. We want to ensure that we have enduring access to those Canadiana collections, and that's just kind of the baseline in a way for the evolution of infrastructure. Now to the fun stuff. As we think and look towards the future. Slide. Thank you very much. Connie, I appreciate it. Over the last several years, as post-merger, CRKN has been investing in paying down technical debt. So Canadiana was kind of just maintaining, but not evolving. And so we paid down that technical debt. We've separated was one platform into an access and preservation platform so that we can leverage common use software, hardware, and tools that we weren't able to do when it was completely home-built infrastructure, if I can call it that. So we've had a big year of upgrades here in 2021, and especially with user-facing features and collaborations. As a leader in the Canadian digital cultural heritage field, CRKN has been intentionally creating governance, business models, and technical mechanisms that will help transform Canadiana into a modern, member-driven digital content and research infrastructure. And the content in Canadiana is one part of the national digital heritage landscape. And we're now ready to strongly enhance the connections between our content at Canadiana and member content to create new and innovative research opportunities that do not currently exist in Canada. Working with a newly created researcher council and the CRKN board of directors, we're beginning to develop a vision for the Canadiana of the future. And we know that to meet that vision, the scope of that vision, we are going to need external sources of funding. So we're aiming for a CFI Innovation Fund grant as we move forward. That's part of our thinking and our preparation plans at the moment. So CRKN has built, of course, the expertise over years in licensing commercially available content. And we are also in the perfect position to use those same skills to build community capacity, collective investments, access to content and preservation for Academy-owned content. The board of directors of CRKN and the members of our Preservation and Access Committee are keen to ensure that all future development is meeting the evolving needs of members and researchers. We plan to embark on a multi-year large-scale project to create open, modern, scholarly infrastructure that will increase research and collaboration potential to a level we hope never before available with Canadian content. Right. So the modernization of the platform and our new ability to incorporate external content into Canadiana are 2 examples of how we're pushing the development forward. As we continue to modernize our processes, we will focus on increasing our interoperability and user-driven development. The new features are intentional steps that we're taking that ultimately lead us to that large-scale collaborative digital infrastructure project and that will create innovative research and collaboration capacity across the Canadian digital heritage collections. And we're in the middle of a half virtual, half in-person conference at CRKN. So we completed our virtual conference week last week, 2 weeks ago now, and we have our in-person conference coming up at the end of the month, and we will have a full day with CRKN members devoted to talking about this, about that future and how we're going to evolve ourselves. So in terms of the platform itself, what is it? It was launched in 2008, intended to create, disseminate, and preserve the knowledge base of Canadian memory organizations in digital form, and to provide easy online access to this extraordinary wealth of documentary resources. Canadiana and the Trustworthy Digital Repository now preserve and provide access to over 19 million pages of the digitized heritage content and the 41 million pages of the Heritage collection, largely available to both institutions and the public at no cost. The platform itself is currently a centralized website and platform. And as I was mentioning, it was monolithic. It was a monolithic slab, as my current manager of research and infrastructure calls it, a monolithic slab of mostly custom code. I love it. Like, oh, okay, all right. And it was intended to provide preservation in the Trustworthy Digital Repository through a dark archive, and then access via a set of web portals to the actual content. It was maintained by a small team of 4 systems analysts or systems administrators and developers. And technically, while the code is open source and available on GitHub, it's really only internal staff who are contributing to that. So the quality of the team, and we've been very fortunate, has been the quality of their work has been excellent, but because it is not common open infrastructure, we are limited in what we can do. So where are we going? We're going to continue our transition to becoming open scholarly infrastructure. And what does that look like? Where relevant, we replace our custom code with OSS applications. We are moving to Archivematica, OpenSwift for preservation, using Folio and Digirati's manuscript editor for manuscript and metadata management, exhibit.so for decentralized display. We're developing and document and support for open APIs to support non-web access to collections and to support a decentralized approach to collection management and display. We're integrating and engaging with other infrastructure providers and tools, Coalition Publica being one, Lyricist in the US, the Digital Research Alliance of Canada, Scholars Portal, some of our international colleagues like Europeana and Trove. And then also open journal systems, Erudit, DSpace, all of that. So integrating and working with those other infrastructure providers. And we're looking at community governance changes as well. So, sorry, give me a second to get to the right here. There we go. Communicating timelines clearly through our public roadmaps. I have to say, we learned this year, because this is what happens when you transition and make evolution in your infrastructure, that you don't always realize all of the communities that you might be affecting by a change to your infrastructure. So we are continuing to learn and evolve. And so we want to communicate more effectively through our public roadmaps, to introduce change through clear, robust user testing. So we're enhancing our infrastructure to enable that. And of course, we will continue to evolve our member engagement in goal setting and feature development. And in part, we're doing that with our researcher council, but not limiting to that group of people, but also and they are thinking about how do we reach out more broadly to our research community. And then what about open, about the community support transition? So we introduce or improve our community support options. We will be introducing community support options through a forum, through Slack, through GitHub, through Product Board. We intend to provide document and support for decentralized content sharing for the member institutions and others, improve accessibility to content overall, especially to different kinds of users and communities. All of which we hope results in increased transparency, increased member and community engagement and ownership, increased member satisfaction, and increased access to content, and improved relationships and interoperability. And of course, the all exciting item for our digital humanities researchers, exciting new and cool tools. So the future, of course, takes time to nurture. It will take time for sure. It takes a lot of work to balance both the various community priorities. And we really will need buy-in from our member community in terms of the amount of time that that they devote to us, that they're willing to give us to do the work. The ideas that we are seeking from researchers, and not just and this is really something we're wrestling with right now as we think about what is innovation. We can evolve the platform to be something that serves research of today, but what is research of tomorrow going to look like? How does machine learning fit into this? Where is AI in all of this? How do we enable bias-free, if we can, AI within that research infrastructure? So of course, the move shows a maturity in governance and technology, but the Canadiana collections really need to become far more accessible and relevant, so that institutions are able to contribute to access and display content in new ways, and that researchers will have that new ways to access and integrate content with their research. And of course, we want to really contribute to Canada's role as an international leader in digital research infrastructure. Our next steps involve formalizing and proposing a roadmap approach, user testing, evaluating next generation tools for adoption and integration into the infrastructure, implementing that roadmap and user testing, of course, developing improved member engagement and user feedback processes, and beginning tool integration, API developments and documentation, and then implementing improved member engagement feedback processes and keeping those wheels turning. And all of which is just, that's sort of the interim next steps. In the long run, it's wrestling with, and this is what our researcher council is focused on. Some of your colleagues here are on the researcher council. And to really think about what is innovation, how do researchers want to use the platform and the content in the future? How can we build that infrastructure to support you as end users in the long run? So I think I was supposed to take 40 minutes. And look at me, 40 minutes, yay.
I'll be keeping an eye on the chat and like yelling for the mics during the Q&A.
Sorry, Candice, you'll have to use, you have to change the microphones. Yeah.
We'll pass the lab back and forth to make sure that folks online can hear us well. It sounds like the mics in the room aren't necessarily picking us up. Thank you very kindly. We do have 20 minutes for questions. I'll keep an eye on the Q&A on Zoom, and folks are welcome to ask questions in the room. Although if there aren't any to start, then I will definitely take the chair's prerogative to be like, I have questions. Yep, I'm gonna do it. So, I mean, one of the things that I find so striking about like the diversification of the things that CRKN provides, and then like also sort of provides as sort of freely accessible to folks. I mean, that's sort of a striking move. But also, I wanted to ask about the process of convincing is probably the wrong word, but like engaging with member libraries to say, you know, member libraries are spending a huge amount of money and making all of these services available to everyone. And I feel like this is like a wonderful model for sustaining things, for making things accessible, and that we have a few examples of that in Canada, but not so many. And I feel like consortia are so often the way forward. I was just wondering if you'd speak to us a little bit about the culture you've developed among the member libraries and sort of moving together as a group to say, yes, we're going to make all of this material available to everyone, and how that process works.
Thanks, Connie. Not a small question. No, I think that's a great question. And when how's this sound, by the way? Just checking. Should I read? Clasper, we're okay? Okay. I think we've actually done pretty well in Canada. We are a pretty collaborative community in the academic world, I think, generally. I know, of course, universities are in competition with each other to some extent. That's real. That's part of our landscape. But I think, you know, when I interact with colleagues in the US and in other parts of the world, and we actually do a pretty good job of collaboration. And when we speak with our American colleagues, because we're a smaller country, we are not geographically, obviously, but population-wise, we are able to do a lot of collaborative initiatives that may not be possible in some other areas. So I think there's a culture of collaboration anyway in the community, and it isn't without you know, hills to climb, if I can call it that, because we have lots of different things going on. You know, we think about our colleagues at CARL, the Canadian Association of Research Libraries, are really looking at what is going on in the whole community of institutional repositories in Canada, and how can we align those efforts more across the country a little bit more effectively, or even regionally. And so that's going on at the same time as this kind of development and research infrastructure development. We're thinking about it, CRKN, we're also involved in a conversation with our colleagues in the Ontario Council of University Libraries, and to expand a preservation platform, Scholars Portal, to that is currently a preservation of journal content, commercial journal content, but it's only for Ontario libraries. So we're talking about how do we expand that. So there's lots of overlap in some ways of those conversations, and it's always an opportunity for us to think about, okay, where is overlap something that we can actually leverage and take advantage of, not just things that we have to do separately. Some of the, you know, and we're very actively talking, for example, with Susan Brown about links and how does that fit together with the kinds of projects that we're doing. So it takes work, obviously, and it's interesting at CRKN because we have our smallest member institution, Université Sainte-Anne, is, you know, small FTE, and then we have University of Toronto at the other end of the spectrum, super large FTE, a large research dollars. So, you know, it's sometimes challenging to balance the needs of the diversity of our community. But I think we've built that mechanism for engaging with the community through regular check-ins, through our annual meetings and conferences to really do that feedback loop. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay, I'll just repeat the question and that'll make it easier. Yeah. So yeah. 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 Right. Yeah. Right. 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 Yeah. Okay. So let me see if I can articulate the question for those on Zoom in a sort of summary format. Really high level, how are we deciding what content and collections go into the platform? And is there space and scope for research, production of outputs of research content to be included potentially in the platform, where currently they might be seeking a home, really, and it's not an easy place to find that. Great questions. Also questions that our researcher council has posed as a point of fact. I'll start with kind of the simple answer. We had a task group last year to consider how do we enhance and evolve the content within the platform. So they came up with a whole bunch of recommendations, and the outcome of that was forming, because we love to do this in the library world, we formed another committee. So we have the Canadiana content subcommittee, and they're really helping us to prioritize that, to think about. And I will say at a really high level, newspapers, that's what we hear the most of from the research community. But that's kind of like the low hanging fruit in a way, the quick wins, except that it's not so easy because of rights management, but that's another story altogether. So we do have a committee formed to start looking at that question, I think, and it is a really interesting question about sort of the outputs of research and how do we store and preserve those so that they can be repurposed and reused, and not just hidden in one spot or another. So that is something I think we have to wrestle with over the coming months and years. If our manager for research, infrastructure, and development were here, I'm sure he'd have something very wise to say about it. But it's really a question we're wrestling with right now, but an opportunity. I think a really interesting opportunity for us to think about how can that evolve. And actually, I was on a call with the Humanities and Social Sciences Commons folks, our friend Ray Siemens, and that actually question came up in that conversation as well. Like, where is the infrastructure to support that kind of preservation and accessibility of research outputs in that sense? So a really great question. I don't have a fast answer, but absolutely we're exploring kind of it's top of our mind answer at the moment. No, not at all. No. No, absolutely not. It's all about, I mean, you know, the challenge is about, and when we start thinking about, it's a bit about the length of the history of the content, right? So it's about copyright and all of that becomes a bit more challenging, like what's in the content, and is there copyrighted material in there, which, I mean, you would know as well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's well, and of course the whole, and that's an interesting thing that we can do now that we weren't able to do before, which is to do that dark archiving as well. So where we can do preservation without necessarily providing access. So we can separate those two functions out if needed. I wouldn't say yeah. I'm like, oh, my colleagues are gonna slap me a hand soon. Yes.
I know that CRKN has members from French language institutions. The question here too is about the relationship between CRKN and Quebec-based archives with members of BanQ or some of the smaller archives, what that relationship looks like, and some of the work there. Great.
Thank you. Well, BANQ is a member of CRKN. So, whoops, sorry, very loud there. So we continue to have conversations and discussions. We actually have a big project going on with the University of Ottawa at the moment to digitize and add a French language content into into the platform at the collections, the Canadiana collections, and it's funded by University of Ottawa. So thank you very much. So we do have lots of French language content in the Canadiana platform, and we do are working with our colleagues across Quebec. So we have members on both our preservation and access committee and the content, whatever it's called, Canadiana content subcommittee, sorry, too many committees, from Quebec member institutions as well. And there's lots of, again, it's aligned work that's going on. So for example, the metadata initiatives, obviously it's not an English only problem. So there's lots of great work being done in Quebec. And so we work closely with our member institutions on that. You know, and I think it's, there's always, we're not trying to steal content from anybody, if I could say that. Like it's not an either or thing, right? You don't have to choose to have your content in only one place. It can be in multiple places. And it's a little bit, and we're really thinking about this. How do we leverage the content that already is out there to be more accessible through a variety of means for as a sort of singular corpus for research by researchers? I don't know if I articulated that very well, but okay.
If not, I'm going to prepare myself another one. So now's your chance to like be a giant hook and like pull me off stage. In which case, I think I have a like question that is like maybe like the converse of Felicity's, like rather than you know, publishing and depositing information with CRKN. I was wondering if you could speak to, oh, this might be for the technical council folks, with some of the changes to the technology open APIs and that kind of thing that you're planning, and persistent identifiers and that sort of thing. If there's been any discussion of what some of the use cases for those by projects, you know, drawing on your identifiers, pulling in content might be, yeah, in that way.
Ooh, interesting. Yes, we want use cases. How about that? We're trying to build up, and of course, if we're you know, if we're looking to do a CFI application, we need use cases. So we're looking to build up a bit of a repository of use cases, if I can say that. And in terms of, you know, one of the things that we've talked about, and this is perhaps not a small project, is actually, could we apply DOIs to all of the Canadiana content? That would be really exciting. So that we, yeah, I mean, how do we integrate that broader research infrastructure? The Digital Research Alliance of Canada has funded the persistent identifier community and is funding DataCite Canada and our work with them and ORCID Canada as well. So there's some really interesting development work that we're doing on that side. So of course we have to look at how these interplaying activities will work together. And my hands are moving as the microphone's moving, is probably like, what? Speak louder. So I think it's, I don't have a like fast answer, but it is definitely something that we're building towards. I'm trying to sell the future here.
You know, this is so much like the, I don't know, like my feeling of like the earlier web, like, you know, sort of like the last 20 years was like, oh, like this is the Wild West, both in a like negative colonial sense and in the like, well, there's sort of dirt roads down where people just decided to send the wagons, and like that a lot of this sounds to me like really paving the roads properly, like putting in stop signs. You can know that the road will be there next year, you know, that kind of thing that lets people then plan their lives around it in a way that that when things are a little bit more Wild West makes digital scholarship more challenging. So yeah, it's nice to see the paving and the lights going in now. Do we have any more questions here? And I should check. I'm not always good at checking the chat. Sorry, folks. Oh, we do have one open question. Hey, my apologies to. Oh, we've got a question from Talia Chung. Saying this is a terrific overview of CRKN's history and future. Thank you, Claire. Going forward, can you speak a bit about engagement with other cultural heritage organizations, archives, and museums who are also engaged in digitization practices?
Yeah, maybe Talia, are you thinking, and maybe you can respond in chat, nationally or internationally? Just getting the response here, both, maybe. Well, let me, in fact, why am I asking that? I can respond to that. Yes, both. Yeah, actually, part of our next steps right at the moment is to do some research. We're doing some research through a consultant about how infrastructure has been developed in other countries for this type of infrastructure. For example, with Europeana, with Trove, with forgetting, I'm having a little mental blip here. DPLA, and like, it's not all about, what worked perfectly, but also what didn't work that we need to think about in terms of the way that we design our own infrastructure. And absolutely, how can we interplay and intersect with those the corpus and the tools that are available internationally? Because I think that's a really important question. And also, and national, okay. Yes, I mean, and yes, then moving on to the national, coming back in. Of course, and I was mentioning, and Talia, you'll be very familiar with this, the work that's going on at Carl about institutional repositories and how are we going to align that work? Because there's great overlap here, right? There's some really interesting scope for making more content available across those different infrastructures. And when I think about, I had a train of thought, just let me recoup it. When my brain went into different, and not just within our member institutions, but also, for example, we're working together with Library and Archives Canada and Internet Archive on how can we enhance government publications and share the content of government publications between the three of us to make it accessible in different ways, right? So repurposing that. And okay, I've kind of lost my own train of thought. I think I'm probably not answering Talia's question, if she has some example. And there's Anne Moore. Okay.
Emmanuel Chateau-Dutier from the University of Montreal saying, he knows that CRKN is using IIIF, the linked data standard, for images internally. Are there future plans to use those externally for exhibits?
Absolutely, 100%. We would love to be able to create curated collections as we go forward. That's definitely on the horizon. And IIIF, yay, go IIIF! Lots of great things there, and whatever the tools are of the future, right? For sure, that is near and dear to the hearts of our developers, is to be able to enhance our own infrastructure, to be able to take better advantage of these super incredible tools that exist out there that have not been accessible to Canadiana in the past because of our infrastructure. So yay, more coming for sure. Yeah, more paved roads coming in the future.
Might be more people are clamoring. It's always lovely to see students coming to these events. I can see some names I recognize in the chat too. We have a student question asking if there are curious about opportunities for students to get involved with CRKN.
Yes. Actually, an interest, I'm trying to remember which university, it might be Regina. We're actually in the midst of a project to bring in some student work into the collection, and I forgive me, I'm just saying that off the top of my head because I just heard it in passing the other day. So student articles, we actually had a collection that Carl had funded of student content, student newspapers, I think. So that's just in terms of adding content to our own collections. How can students become involved? We, at one point during COVID, we actually had launched a bit of a crowdsourced description project as well. Which I kind of, we got some description, yay, thank you, transcription, I mean, sorry. But that isn't a huge thing right now, but I think that's a question I will take back to my colleagues and say, are there opportunities that we can build in for students to participate? So thank you for the prompt.
Great, do we have any other questions here from the room? well, then perhaps both online. Oh, I should be looking wherever the cameras. Hello, people online, both online and in person. We can have a round of applause. Thank you very kindly, Claire. This is very exciting. I would like to invite folks to join us for our future lectures. Our next event as part of the digital culture series is the day-long Entretien Jacques Cartier on November 29th. It'll be happening from 9 till 6 p.m. in FSS 4007, a room with a view. The registration link is available at the faculty and the Entretien Jacques Cartier website. So we'll hope to see folks in November for that. But again, we'll have another round of applause to say thank you very kindly, Claire. And thank you to the folks online.